Good afternoon, folks, or evening for some of you, depending on where you're joining us from, and welcome to the Africam show, powered by Explore. My name is Jamie Patterson, and I will be your ranger for this afternoon. Now, remember, the cool thing about this is that this is a live and interactive show. So what that means is that if you have any questions about what you're seeing, you can just pop them in the comments section below, and I'll try to answer as many as I can. So we're starting off our afternoon in a very lazy way with a spotted hyena lying at the entrance to a den. Now that is very unusual behavior for most spotted hyenas when it's hot like this, and it is hot at the moment. They typically spend their days or their afternoons lying up in the shade underneath the bush. Now the reason that this particular individual, hello girl, is doing this is because she has 2 young cubs in there. So for the first few weeks, the mother will spend as much time as possible with her little cubs. And then, after a little while, they get a little bit too boisterous for her, at which point she'll move further and further afield until she's leaving them for hours at a time. Paulette, thank you so much for joining us. You say that you love everything in Africa. Well, I couldn't agree with you more. I love everything in Africa as well. I particularly love spotted hyenas, partly because they have such an undeserved bad reputation, but also because they are astoundingly complex and intelligent animals. Now, the cool thing about the nomad camp being set up at this den site is that a hyena clan can number anywhere from 5 individuals to up to 70, even 80 in a clan. And they don't spend all of their time together because that would just be ridiculous. But the den is like the social hub of the clan. So whether or not they have cubs, every individual will pop in at some point to greet the others, to reaffirm those social bonds that they have. And that's actually where most of what we know about hyenas comes from, is time spent observing their behavior at the den. And we actually saw some very interesting interaction at the den a couple of nights ago, so let's have a look at that. Just listen to the sounds that they make. That low groaning. Now watch their body language very carefully. Watch the tails of the 2 individuals, and I'll explain what we're seeing in a moment. So spotted hyenas go through quite an elaborate greeting ceremony when they say hello to each other after time spent apart. And that little cub, watch the way that it's responding and the way that it's already picked up on these adult behaviors. So look at the tail of the hyena on the left, the adult on the left, and look at the tail of the hyena on the right. And I'm going to explain that in a second. Now watch the cub as it goes through exactly the same process. Now, with a tail up like that, as the hyena on the right was doing, and is going to do again in a moment, that is a very, very clear sign of dominance. So that you'll notice that the hyena that greeted her kept its tail down, and has kept its tail down through most of this interaction, whereas the one following the cub now has got her tail up, and she is sniffing at the cub. Now we can learn a lot just from this brief little interaction. This poor little cub, this situation's a little bit too much for it, but it's got to learn. Here we go, getting a thorough sniffing, and chattering away a little bit. all a bit overwhelmed by the attention of the hyena with its tail around up over her back. Now what we can tell from that is that that is a very dominant individual, and in fact is more dominant than the one that came up to greet her. So hyenas have a very strict linear hierarchy that they follow within their clan, and that hierarchy is inherited. And what that means is that the cubs have to learn from their mothers. And that is how they claim their status within the clan. So if you picture, those of you with kids or grandkids, if you picture what it's like having toddlers at a party. Now imagine you threw all social norms out of the window and behaved exactly in a very selfish, self-serving way. Your toddler would mimic your behavior, and that pattern of behavior would stick with them for the rest of their life. And hyenas are no different. So that little cub is already learning where it sits in the clan hierarchy. Stephanie, you say that the hyena have been extremely entertaining on this camera. Hyena are always entertaining. They're particularly entertaining when they have young cubs, because that's when you can really start to unravel their dynamics. They're also very playful, which I don't think a lot of people realize about spotted hyenas, is that they play, and that's how they reaffirm their bonds. It's not all about hierarchy and dominance. And Kathy, you say no wonder hyena dens smell. Everybody and their brother visits. You are absolutely right. And then you throw in the fact that they're not particularly fussy about where they leave their waste, and they also mark their territory, and their territorial markings are more concentrated around the den site, and you have a recipe for a really smelly area. Then, if you get a high-ranking female who's got cubs of a sort of around about 6 to 9 months old, but sometimes even earlier, what she will do is she will bring food back to the den as well. So now you've got decomposing smelly carcass and all sorts of other things gathering there, which of course is why hyenas move dens fairly regularly, particularly when there's lots of cubs. The parasite load gets a little bit much with all of that muck hanging about, and then they shift the cubs so that they don't end up with any ectoparasites that they don't need. Andy, thank you so much. You're saying welcome to me. I really miss you all as well. It's been a very long time. Been busy with so many different things. Stacey, you say so nice that I have hyenas and that it's great to see me, in inverted commas. I know, you know how I feel about hyenas. I really think they're very special animals. I miss them terribly. Now that I spend more time in the city, I do feel like I'm long overdue a bit of magic hyena time. So this is the next best thing in the world. And of course I get to be joined by all of you as well. Now, that little cub that we were looking at earlier, probably, I would guess, somewhere around about 3 or so months old, maybe a little bit younger, maybe a little bit, no, I wouldn't say older, I would say 3 months. It's got its spots, but it still retains a little bit of that babyish look, the short legs that they start to lose at around about 5 months old. They get a bit shaggier and a bit longer legged. Now, that little cub has got a world of learning to do, just like a child or a puppy, perhaps. And some of that revolves around the clan, but of course some of that also revolves around getting to know the world around it, and that starts at the den with visits from the neighbors. And in fact, that little hyena had a visit from a porcupine not too long ago, so let's have a look at that clip. Porcupine not too sure what to make of it, and the cub definitely not sure make of this whole thing. I'm not sure whether it's its first encounter with the porcupine, but probably one of the first, certainly at that sort of age. Oh, no, adult not hanging around. Not even an adult hyena really wants to mess with a porcupine. And we actually have some interesting stuff happening with a porcupine a little bit later as well. Speed wobble. Watch this little cub trying to decide whether or not it is brave enough to approach. You can see how the porcupine's all puffed up. I think most of you will be familiar with the way that porcupines work. Those quills, of course, are just modified hairs, very specialized hairs, and they are inserted into the skin and attached to a muscle that is able to pull them upright like that, just like when you get goosebumps, when you get cold. Porcupines do the same thing, and they do it when they get threatened. Now, hyenas can and do catch porcupines on occasion. Most of the time, though, there is a general state of truce around a den site, and in fact hyenas will even share dens with porcupines on occasion. It's really more commonly seen with brown hyena, particularly in the Kalahari, where they just basically use separate entrances to the same den. Porcupine's not too sure what to make of this either. How brave are you really feeling? What's that? What that cub is looking at is the largest rodent in southern Africa, and indeed Africa. The Cape porcupine is the largest of the porcupine species here. If you watch that adult, you can see that it's really totally unconcerned. And the porcupine's picking up on that as well. So the porcupine knows that the adult is not really likely to be a threat and that it's the cub. But it's better safe than sorry. Now, when a porcupine is really feeling threatened, it will actually present its rump to the threat. So the spiky end, essentially, which makes sense. And then reverse, if necessary, at high speed towards its attacker. Oh, little cub's still not sure. Neither is the porcupine. And retreat quickly to the safety of the den. And I'm going to explain a little bit more about the way that they construct dens in a moment, but let's just watch as our porcupine moseys on off, being watched closely by the cub. No. Oh, reverse. You can see how strong that instinct is within hyena cubs to move towards the den site when they do feel threatened. Adults not interested at all. And now the little cub is pretending that it's totally nonchalantly taken this whole thing in its stride. And off trundles the porcupine. Very cool. Now, Wanda, you say that Disney's Lion King made you not like hyenas. It's been a very common narrative, and certainly The Lion King didn't help, but it actually goes back a very long time. In a lot of sort of traditional stories, hyenas are harbingers of evil, and they are associated with all sorts of nasty things. It doesn't help that they will scavenge off on occasion. They've been known to scavenge off in cemeteries and so on. So you really are taking a poor animal and putting quite a pressure on it with the bad impression they have made. The Lion King really didn't help. It's a little bit like the Jaws effect. But they are very special animals. They, generally speaking, in most parts of their range, hunt at as much as 90 to 95% of what they actually eat. So they're not mainly scavengers. They are very capable hunters. Lynn, going back to the den, which I think is so interesting, you say, do they build that den themselves? No, they don't, but they do excavate it. So typically what spotted hyenas will do is they will come into where there is an old aardvark burrow that perhaps has been broadened out by something like a warthog or a porcupine, actually, and they make themselves at home in a series of tunnels. There are usually multiple entrances, but what the cubs do is within that they excavate themselves little shelves and little secret entrances that they can go into that are very, very small. So even though that entrance hole looks very large, once you go in, it narrows significantly so that something like a lion can't get in after them. So they do sort of excavate themselves. Cindy, just quickly, you want to know how long it takes to raise a hyena cub? Spotted hyenas have quite a long time until they reach independence. It's usually around about 18 months, up to even 2 years. And the reason behind that is because it actually takes them quite a long time to develop those powerful jaw muscles. So it's a very specialized jaw that they have. And as a result, it actually takes them a considerable period of development to reach that point. Usually high-ranked mothers, their cubs reach independence first or sooner because they get better access to food. They get better milk, they get better food when they do start eating meat, and so on. So they're ready at a much quicker stage. Shirley, you say, my goodness, that porcupine is huge. I know, they are absolutely enormous. I've encountered a few once or twice in my time. Porcupines are notorious for coming into camps and searching for scraps of human food. And I once found one in my lounge. which was an interesting experience because I don't know if you've ever tried, you probably haven't, I could be wrong, if you've ever tried to get a porcupine out of your house, but it's not an easy process and required a broom. Belinda, you say you love hyenas because of the stuff that we went through. I know. I'm really glad that that is something that I've been able to accomplish with some people, is just change their mind a little bit about the hyenas. Pounce, what would the porcupine gain by invading their space? There is a possibility that it's searching for bones to gnaw on. Porcupines do like to gnaw on bones, and there are often bones around hyena dens. The porcupines even bring bones back to their den site. It might also just be that it's searching for something nice to eat, and it's stumbled upon the hyenas. Porcupines are not fast, so their approach is not really to run away from a threat. Now, it is particularly hot over here, so we're going to go and have a look at perhaps some elephants, although apparently they are now on their way, but they were at one of the water holes earlier. Let's go have a look. But in the meantime, I've mentioned that it is hot. It is indeed. It is now summer. Most of you are now going into winter. Here we go. Oh, the Ellies have gone. They do that. It's quite all right. We can enjoy a change of scene because I don't think the hyenas are going to move at any point anytime soon. Now, for us, we are coming into spring, which means that everything is going green, but it means that we're entering into the hottest time of year, and it's probably a good 2 or 3 months before the rains arrive, the proper real summer thunderstorms that come over most of South Africa. And that's an excellent time to go and visit the bush or spend time in the bush, because everything is concentrated around available water. So you've got these pans like the one that we're looking at now, and that's all that's left. And it's going to get drier and drier, and only the big pans or the big water holes or even the sort of patches of river will remain, or the deep patches of river will be all that remains in terms of water. So although the animals are getting nutritious food, because the trees are starting to get their new leaves, it still means that they have to concentrate around water sources. Oh, we've got something there. Is it a tawny? A pair of them, or is that Wahlbergs? Looks like it might be. Oh, they too. I wonder what they've been after. They might also have been after water. They could be. It's possible. It looks like a bit early for Wahlbergs. I don't think that's Wahlbergs. It could be that they are catching catfish, or possibly the odd frog or something like that in the dried out pans. Not too sure. It was good spotting though. Right, what I was going to say was that as the water holes shrink, the animals start to concentrate around water holes, and that means that for the predators, it provides the ideal hunting opportunity. And that's what we have been seeing at the Tembe waterhole, which is where we are at the moment, over the last few days. And now we're going to have a quick look at a lion and her 3 sub-adults who've been making the most of the hunting opportunities, and just recently managed to catch themselves what I think was a small nyala. Let's have a look at the clip. So there we go. Have a look at the lions in the background. You should see 2. There we go. Now, there's one on the left behind the guarri bush. And there's the lioness hiding behind a termite mound and trying to gauge exactly how successful she's going to be from this angle. And the answer is not successful at all. So she's going to move back behind cover. Now, a sensible approach, because we also, watch on the right, have another lion who has tried a different approach. So this is a bit of a sensitive sighting for those of you who don't like this kind of thing. Here comes the lioness. There goes the little nyala. And she's got it. There we go. Now watch the other lions come racing in to see what she's caught. So that sound that you heard was obviously the poor little nyala crying out in distress. I always find sightings like this a little bit sad, but at the same time safe in the knowledge that the predators are getting what they need in order to sustain themselves, and this is a time of year that they have to take advantage of. So there we go, the two young boys tucking in like your average teenage boy. They've got so much growing to do, and they really do. They grow exponentially fast from around about a year to around about 3 years. It's just ridiculous. And so they are forever hungry. Just like those of you who have had teenage boys or had to feed teenage boys, you know exactly what that's like. There's never enough food in the fridge. They're constantly hungry. Well, male lions are exactly like that. Luckily, their lioness managing to make off with some of it. And shame. She's had to move it into the sun because in the shade, she's not going to get a chance to get a nice, healthy bite of that. Now, apparently, back to those birds very briefly. Apparently, those were yellow-billed kites that we saw earlier. But let's just finish off with our lions. Dismantling the Nyala. Now, with a big kill like that, they will finish off everything. There we go. We have a retreating elephant bottom. Lovely. You would have seen with those lions earlier, there were also elephants hanging around the waterhole. This is my favorite time of year, actually, to spend out in the bush in South Africa. It is just, it's got that spring feel to it, but at the same time, the sightings are just incredible. So there goes a bull. He's obviously come down for a drink and a bit of a splash. You can see his skin's wet from where he's been splashing himself, helping to cool down. To put things into perspective, the temperatures are now skyrocketing around the greater Kruger area up to 37, 38 degrees centigrade. So it's well over 100 Fahrenheit. It's really very warm. So for a big animal like an elephant, it's quite a challenge to keep cool. Cindy, you say that you've been watching the lions. I hear they have been absolutely prolific around that waterhole in recent times. It's great for them, of course. I mean, once the rains start and once we sort of go past the birthing season for a lot of the animals. So you've got the impala giving birth, the wildebeest giving birth, the zebras usually giving birth all around the same time, and the warthogs around about that sort of early summer season. But once that passes and once those little babies have found their feet, then life gets a lot tougher for the predators because there's water everywhere, so their prey is spread out all over the show. It's very difficult for them to move silently, so it becomes a much more challenging time. And that's why, although we don't have a strict breeding season, we often get a peak of births, and especially with wild dogs who are actually seasonal breeders. You get them timing the birth of their pups. Oh, we've got some impalas coming down to drink at Rosy Pan. You've got the baby boom as well with the predators, shame. I always feel a little bit sorry for animals approaching a waterhole. They get so skittish and skittery, but you can hardly blame them because there are always predators waiting in the wings. Now, I mentioned spring, and perhaps there's a bit of spring fever in the air. The impalas are going to be giving birth soon, and as it happens, some wild dogs were showing some romantic feelings not too long ago. Let's have a quick look at that clip. So there we go. We have 3 males who are intent on giving this cell a thorough sniffing. And you'll see that they are very, very interested in her. I have a few theories about this particular clip, but I don't know how accurate they are. It was in Baluli, so in the greater Kruger. You can have a look. You can see the blood staining the fur around their faces and necks, and you can see how round-bellied they are. Wild dogs are typically quite slim, athletic-looking animals, but this lot have clearly just eaten a very large meal. And the poor female just wants to lie in the shade without finding herself the center of attention. You can imagine how hot they get with a full belly like that. Here comes the 4th male in to see what everybody else is up to. Don't know why it was separate from the group. Have a listen now to what happens. This one's just going to make sure the female's still there. She's still there, buddy, don't worry. She's still around. Listen carefully. So what happened there was you've got the bird's alarm calling, and then the other wild dog walked in, and the pack all got a fright, and then it got a fright as well, just in case. Now, this is my favorite thing about wild dogs, watching their interactions together. You can see their fluffy tails wagging. They're always so thrilled to see each other. Lions sometimes do this, but then most of the time they're grumpy and they growl at each other. But wild dogs are always happy to see another member of the pack. And those gorgeous ears. You can really see the blood clearly there. So I think, and I don't know this for certain, but I would guess that this is either a newly formed pack or a dispersal pack perhaps. Oh, hello Ellie. You're keeping nice and cool. I would guess that that's a dispersal pack. It wouldn't be normal for a female to be coming into estrus at this time of year, because they typically give birth around May to June, or July even, and they only have a 2-month gestation period. So the female should only really be coming into estrus at the beginning of the year, February, March even. So I suspect that what's happening is that that pack is now establishing themselves and basically settling into the hierarchy that they will have, and one of those males will eventually become the alpha male of the pack and earn his right to breed with her. There we go. The Ellies are having a field day at this time of year. Now, this chap's just had a properly nice bath. Lynn, you say that you love elephants. They're more human than humans. I have never ever experienced the same feeling as I get when I sit with elephants and I look into their eyes. There is something deeply sentient there. I don't know exactly what it is. I think my human brain would probably struggle to fully comprehend it. But I really do believe that they are very special animals. Beautiful brown eyes. Him stretching out his trunk. He doesn't want to drink from the muddy patches of the water. So he's going to reach for places where it's clean, even using the really prehensile tip of his trunk to shift away the mud and then get to the nice bits. No, didn't like that bit so much. Try that again. No. Those astonishingly dexterous trunks. There must be... It must require serious brain power to have that kind of coordination as well. If you think about it, there's a lot of muscles in that trunk that they have to control and move around. Stunning. Now, before we finish off, there's one last clip I would really like to show you, because it is something very unusual that I have never seen before. So let's have a quick look at when the porcupine met the python. Let's have a look at the clip. Now, this is absolutely fascinating, and what I find most fascinating about this is that the porcupine must know that that snake is there. That snake cannot be moving over that ground completely silently, yet it has showed absolutely no concern or interest. It's slightly puffed up, but other than that it has, I mean, unless it's really engrossed in whatever it's eating. Now, that's a fairly small rock python, but pythons can and have been known to eat porcupines, believe it or not, which seems like an astonishing feat when you think of the fact that they can't exactly pluck out the quills beforehand. But look at the length of this. I said it was a small one. It's relatively small. It's still a very large snake. There it goes. So pythons can, and they have been recorded to eat porcupines. There was an incident not so long ago in South Africa where a porcupine was found in the belly of a python. So what they'll do is they'll actually swallow them face first so that the quills lie in the proper direction. The problem is of course, if that snake is disturbed, and if they do that, they'll actually, most likely their internal organs will be fine because the quills are pushed flat. But if they're disturbed, the instinctive response of a snake is to regurgitate its meal, and that's where the problem comes in. Off he goes. I cannot fathom the total lack of concern from that porcupine, but that is not something you see very often. I've certainly never seen it encountered like that. It's definitely not how I would have predicted it to go. I would have at least expected the porcupine to move out of the snake's way, but no, neither of them concerned at all. Absolutely stunning sighting. And we have a relatively distant relative of the python sunning itself. Crocodile baking in, and I'm sure really enjoying the warmth after the cold of winter. Now, we are almost at the end. Very quickly, Cindy, do elephants mate during their must cycle? So for those of you that don't know, bull elephants, male elephants, go through a period of time where they have heightened testosterone levels, severely heightened testosterone levels. And yes, Cindy, they do mate. They mate more when they are in must, and females show a preference for males that are in must. So there's definitely a correlation between the two, and that is why most likely males do go through must, is to increase their chances of passing on their genetics. Right, folks, that has absolutely flown by, but our time has now come to an end. So thank you all for watching and sending through your questions. It's been wonderful chatting to you. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and join us next week for another Africam show. Have a wonderful day, and goodbye.